In this week's video, we are covering all things home inspection. What you can expect from the home inspection, what the home inspector is going to inspect in the inspection, and we're going to talk about what you should or shouldn't fix in that home inspection report. So stick around. Hey everyone, my name is Danae Hewitt and I am your go-to DFW Realtor here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So a home inspection is the buyer's opportunity to basically look under the hood of the car, all right? So they have already come to see your house. They love it. They've put an offer in. We are under contract, and the first few days of the contract are called our option period here in Texas. In other states, I've heard it called due diligence period, like it's the same thing. So that number of days is usually negotiated. In our market right now, we're seeing anywhere from like 5 to 10 days, and that allows for inspections to happen. So once those buyers get that inspection report, they can come to you, negotiate repairs, and they can decide if they want to move forward with the property or not. Like the buyer has the right to terminate in that option period for any reason, absolutely any reason. They can decide to terminate because, the sky turned purple today, like whatever, they can. But a lot of times what we see throughout the whole escrow process, usually right about 30 days, is once we get under contract, that is the most important thing we negotiate. The price, the terms, everything like that. And then the next set of really important negotiations is going to be after we get those inspection reports done. Besides a home falling out of contract because the buyer can't get financing, we're seeing homes fall out of contract during this inspection period. For whatever reason, there's too much work that needs to be done to a house and a buyer is just not willing to accept the house. The seller's not willing to do any repairs or not willing to do enough repairs for the buyer's needs, and they can terminate. So this inspection period is actually really important. I never count my chickens before they hatch in the escrow process, but once we've gotten through the option period is when I go, okay, we're probably getting to the closing table. There's other things that need to happen, but I feel much better after that option period is over. So let's talk about these home inspectors. The buyer has the right to have the home inspected. So the home inspectors here in Texas, they are actually licensed under the Texas Real Estate Commission, just like us real estate agents. So they have their own licensing number. Home inspectors actually have access to unlock those blue super boxes. Appraisers do as well, and real estate agents. And a little side note here, only agents, inspectors, and appraisers that are paying their dues to their associations can have access to unlock those boxes. So if you haven't been paying your dues, real estate agent, you don't get to get inside those lock boxes. It's like a whole app on your phone. It's a whole thing. So those home inspectors, they are licensed. They have criteria and parameters and continuing education credits that they have to do, training that they have to do to maintain their licenses, to keep up to date with code, things like that. But what they are not is they are not licensed plumbers. They are not licensed electricians. So they are not individually licensed in those areas of expertise. They are a licensed home inspector. So they can look at all of those parts and bring attention to any of those areas that are deficient. So let's say the hot water heater is not working. A lot of times they will note that it's not working, and then it'll also say, please reach out to a licensed plumber for an additional evaluation. Okay, so I'll have a lot of buyers ask me, well, if they're not licensed in all of these things, why don't I have a licensed electrician, a licensed plumber, a licensed HVAC, have an engineer come and look at the foundation? The reason why I tell them you don't want to do that is because that's going to cost you a heck of a lot more money than the home inspector would. Right now, home inspections are going to cost right around like $400. The bigger the house is, the more square footage, then of course it's going to cost more money. And there are add-ons at the home inspection. So that can just, of course, cost you more money. But to have a licensed plumber, a licensed electrician, an engineer, and all that, you're at $1,000 right there. It's a really good idea to have one person come in and look at everything and then If there is a problem with something, then you may probably have to pay another $150 or whatever their service call is to have someone come out to look at a specific issue. Before the home inspection happens, you should receive a seller's disclosure. And the seller's disclosure is something that is filled out by the sellers. And they, to the best of their knowledge, they give you all of the information that they know about the property. Any deficiencies with the property, any past repairs that have been done to the property, any insurance claims that have been filed against the property. And we also want to make sure that they use the money from the insurance claim to fix the issue for the claim. All right. So they have to disclose all of that in a seller's disclosure to you. If an agent provides that to me before I go and show the house, I always give that to my buyers just so they have that information. And we kind of know what we're getting into before we put an offer in and before we hire a home inspector to come out to the property. So let's talk about the 7 areas that a home inspector is going to look at when they come and inspect your house. The first thing is the structural integrity of the home. So they're going to look at the foundation and the roof. They want to make sure that those shingles are intact, haven't lost a lot of granules in there. Are they looking for hail damage or nail pops? Or is the flashing still connected and working properly? Looking at all that on the roof. Oh, and one thing about the roof before I move on to the foundation is in our state, home inspectors are not required to get on top of the roof on a 2-story home. Okay, I mean, two-story homes can be like really, really steep, but they are required to get on top of a roof if it is a 1-story. Now, there are some 1-story houses with some steep roof pitches, okay? So it might be tough for them to even get super like on top of those steep pitches, but a lot of times you'll see is that home inspectors use drone cameras right now, and roofers, they use drones right now, and they can fly that little baby right over the roof and see and look for any damage, all right? So just kind of know that in the back of your mind. The next thing with the structural integrity of the home is the foundation. Foundations are like a big deal here in Texas. Our soil is kind of crap in a lot of areas, and our weather patterns are super, super, super cold and then super, super, super hot. So we just get the severe weather throughout an entire year. So the soil expands and contracts and, like all of this stuff. So it's really important that homeowners water their foundation. It's a really great idea that homeowners have a drip line around their foundation, which is basically a hose, and you literally are just watering the concrete around the foundation. And that helps to keep the moisture content somewhat stable, even though we have these fluctuating temperatures. But there are people that do not water their foundation, like they don't. You can put in your own drip line, but also people may not want to turn their sprinklers or add more sprinklers to water the foundation. Gutters really help to get some of that water from ponding away from your house in a rainstorm. So they just want to make sure that any of the things that support the foundation are also in good working condition as well. They're going to go up inside the attic, and I hate attics, okay? I don't go in attics. Like I will walk up the attic stairs, which is still super creepy because it's dark and sometimes the light switch isn't right there. But I mean, just bless these home inspectors. They go in the attic and they look at the trusses and they look how everything comes together to make sure that that roof line underneath the shingles is properly connected and properly working. The second thing that they inspect are the electrical systems. Before we get into like all the things that they look for, I will tell you that on every single home inspection report I have seen, there is always an electrical issue. Even on my brand new construction house, there were electrical issues on that home inspection report. Okay. So don't be alarmed. Don't be alarmed. So some outlets may not be working. Of course, that's going to be on an inspection. They look for overloaded circuits. They look to see if that electrical panel is labeled correctly. They look to see if it is wired according to code. And I had this happen on a property where a buyer was buying the house, the home inspection came out, and basically that panel was not wired to code anymore. And the buyer was really like almost upset that the sellers would live in this property with their electrical panel that was out of code. And it was me as a homeowner, I have no idea what the current electrical codes are. So my panel could be out of code for all I know. I said, but so it's really rare for a homeowner to check the codes of their panels and make sure it's all good to go. Because if my kitchen lights turn on and my dishwasher works, I'm not checking the panel, like everything works. Okay. So also keep that in mind. Codes change. It doesn't necessarily mean that the homeowner is just completely neglecting the electrical issues in the house. The third thing they're going to look at is the plumbing. So they are going to run that dishwasher. That's like the first thing that a home inspector does when they get into the house, because it's usually like a 3-hour cycle. They're running the faucets for several minutes just to make sure that there's nothing leaking underneath those cabinets. If the home's foundation is on a pier and beam, then they will run those faucets while the home inspector is going under the house. Can you believe that? They go under the house. What is underneath there? Anyways, they go under the house to inspect to make sure that there's no leaks under the house while all of that water is running. I don't do attics, and I definitely have never gone under a house. Okay, no, not happening. But if the home was built in the 60s and it still has cast iron pipes, 100% I would recommend that you get a sewer scope done. That's going to be an additional charge, but it helps to see inside those cast iron pipes to see if any trees have grown inside of them, punctured a hole, to see if there's anything wedged or blocked in them, because obviously this is plumbing, stuff is coming in and out, So that's definitely something that you should always have done, always recommend. They're going to check the HVAC, which is your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So they're going to check not only the condensers outside the house, and they're also going to check the filters on the inside of the house. This is how you always know people aren't changing their filters, is if kind of the metal grate that houses the filter, if that is like full of dirt and super, super dusty and hasn't been vacuumed, then they may not even be changing their air filters. All right. So they're going to be checking all that stuff. They're going to be checking the functionality. They're going to make sure that it's balanced in the house, that one bedroom is not a lot colder than another bedroom in the house. They're going to make sure that the output is the same throughout the house. So just a lot of things that they're going to be looking as well. The fifth thing they're going to look at is the exterior of the home. I mentioned that they're going to make sure that the gutters are facing out to the house and the water is going out, but they're also going to be checking the outside of the windows. They're going to make sure that there's caulking around the windows, and if there has been caulking, has it separated? That might be a sign of movement, foundation movement in a house. It's not a end-all be-all sign of it. They're going to make sure that they don't see any exterior cracks on the brick on the outside of the house. So little piece of information for you. As you're looking on the outside of the house, if you see like hairline cracks that follow the mortar of the brick, follow that mortar line, it's usually not a sign of foundation, because mortar is a less dense material than brick is. So that can certainly separate. If you see cracks that go through brick, then that might be an indication that we have some foundation movement. So in that case, when I'm looking at the house with the buyers before we even put an offer in, is wherever that is on the outside, I go to the inside of the house. If there's any windows next to that movement, I'm opening and closing the windows. I'm opening and closing doors. I'm looking for any hairline cracks that are in the sheetrock or the drywall. If we don't see any of that on the inside of the house, that might be okay, but we still want to keep that in the back of our mind that maybe we do want to have the home inspector kind of look at this specific area and give us their opinion on what they think the status of that foundation is. Also on the exterior of the house, they are going to be looking for any wood rot or any chipping or scaling paint. If you're getting an FHA or a VA loan, those appraisers are a little bit pickier on the condition of the house because those are loans given to us by the government. So rotten wood is a huge no-no. They don't want to have any untreated wood. So it has to have at least a clear stain on it, or obviously a colored stain on it. So it can't be left just exposed wood. They also want to make sure that no paint is chipping off of it. So if a home inspector sees that and they mark that on a home inspection, that might be something that would have to be repaired for financing reasons. The sixth thing that they're going to be looking at is the insulation and the ventilation in a house. Really important. So they're going to go into the attic. Bye-bye. See you later. I'm not going up there. So they're going to go in there and they're going to see how thick that insulation is. Because obviously the thicker it is, then the more insulated your house is, which obviously helps with your heating and your cooling costs. And I don't know what that thickness needs to be right now. I don't know what that standard is, but sometimes they like literally take a ruler and be like, this is how thick it is, and this is outside of the code or whatever. Really, really super important is they want to make sure that your hood vent terminates not to the attic, but that it terminates outside of the home. So this comes up a lot of times in home inspections where you've got like your hood, you're cooking, and you don't want it to ventilate inside the house, obviously, right? You want all that to ventilate up and out. Well, it's not just out into the attic, it has to go outside of the house. All right. So we want to make sure that that is hooked up correctly and that it's not terminating to the attic, that it's terminating outside the house. They're going to be checking the vents in the house, like the dryer vents. They're going to make sure that thing is not clogged because obviously that's a huge safety hazard, huge fire hazard that were ever to be clogged and never cleaned out. And they're going to be checking your bathroom vents as well. The seventh thing that they're going to check are your appliances. So I mentioned this towards the beginning of the video. They're going to be testing that dishwasher. They're going to be testing the oven. They're going to make sure that is calibrated correctly. If they set it to 350, what is actually the internal temperature of that oven? And one thing with an oven is if you have one of those freestanding ovens that's not built into the cabinetry, they're going to be checking for an anti-tip device on it. So it's literally something that attaches the oven to the back of the wall because there have been safety hazards of children opening up that oven drawer, young kids, and it falling. Okay, so I know that's super terrible to even think about, but that's something that they're going to be looking for. They're also going to be testing your microwaves as well. Now, a couple of appliances that they don't test is refrigerator and the washer and dryer, because a lot of times those items are being taken with the seller to their next house. Like they're not even staying with the property. All right. A couple of add-ons that you can pay additional money for in your home inspection is a pest inspection, a termite inspection. Absolutely, 100%. I'm just telling you, you don't have to, but you have to. It's only $100. Can we please make sure that we don't have any termites or carpenter ants in the house or any signs of them possibly building a termite nest and blah, 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 blah. Ooh, it's so gross. Okay. The other thing you can add on is a sprinkler inspection. I highly recommend that too, because if you've got some busted sprinkler heads or they're not facing the right way and you don't know how to fix sprinklers, then you've got that information. You know what is and what isn't working. The next thing is that if the home has a pool, you can get a pool inspection on that. And also if the home is on a well or a septic system. Both of those things can also be inspected at an additional cost. And I see it more often than not. Home inspectors, at least that I work with, they can cover all of that stuff. Now, they are at the house for a very long time, But that one person should be able to do all of those things. Now, let's talk about things that they can't cover, okay? Let's talk about things that the home inspector does not do or can't do. Is obviously they can't look behind the walls, right? Because then they are putting holes in your walls. Okay. They're not going to move furniture to look for something behind a wall. So if there is an outlet behind a couch, they're not going to be able to test that outlet if it's too difficult for them to get to. There's a whole bunch of reasons why they don't. There's a lot of liability if they do any damage to the house, and so they just don't do it. They also don't check anything beneath the flooring. They're not lifting up your flooring to check the subfloor. Obviously, they can't get to that without doing some damage to the flooring. They're not ripping up carpet too or anything like that. So home inspectors, they also look for signs of mold and lead-based paint, but they don't do any testing for it. So if there are signs of it, they will always default in the report to reach out to a licensed mold lead-based paint inspector so that they can test if that substance over there is mold. So something that a home inspector, you might think that they do this, but they don't. This is actually going to fall on you as the buyer or you as the real estate agent, is if there is an extended pergola or if there is a shop on the property, they don't double check that those additions have been permitted. That's up to you and your agent to go to the county records and make sure that pool that they put in is a permitted pool. Okay. All right. So now the home inspector, they've gone through and they have checked absolutely everything in this in this house. What do we do with that report? So a lot of times I have buyers ask me, well, what happens if something fails on the inspection report? And typically inspectors don't mark it as this failed. Nope, not working. A lot of times home inspectors don't mark it as a pass or a fail. It's usually like needs improvement item where the area is deficient and needs further evaluation. I mean, just because the roof is missing granules, it doesn't mean that the roof has failed the inspection. It's just going to mark that it's deficient in that area. So what you do is that you sit down and you talk to your real estate agent and you talk about all the things that are really important to you to have the seller fix at the seller's expense. Okay. And I advise my clients that we want to talk about the main things. If we have a couple of GFCI outlets that are a pretty easy thing to fix, maybe we don't have the seller fix that. But if the kitchen faucet is leaking, that's a little bit more of a pressing issue than GFCI outlets. So we really want to weigh the pros and the cons of what's really important to you and what might be more of a big ticketed item that maybe you don't want to pay for after you move into the house. So from that point, you collect all the things that you want to have the seller at the seller's expense fix, and you go to them and you say, we want you to fix A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or you say, give us the money, give me the money at closing, and I will have those things fixed. All right. So there's a couple things that you can do with that. And then the seller can decide, yes, I will fix them. Yes, or yes, I will give you that money. Or they can say, no, I'm not going to fix A, B, and C, but I'll do the rest. Or you asked for $5,000, I'm only going to give you $3,500, like whatever. This is why we negotiate. And we want the situation to be a win-win for everybody. Okay. We absolutely do. Because the sellers want to sell the house. You want to buy the house. Your agents want to get you guys to the closing table. So if we can make it a win-win for everybody, that of course is the ideal situation. But one thing that you and your agent really need to look at is if you are getting a VA loan or an FHA loan, you have to look at things on that report that would get flagged by an appraiser and would be what we call a lender required repair. If I'm looking at a home inspection report with my client and I know that they are FHA buyers and I see a lot of wood rot around the house, I'm going to talk to that real estate agent. I'm going to say, I think this stuff needs to get fixed before the appraisal because it's going to get flagged in the appraisal. And then of course, that's open to negotiation. All right. I've definitely had this happen where we negotiated repairs on a home inspection and those buyers were getting an FHA loan. They didn't ask for any of that wood rot to be replaced. And the appraiser came out, looked at the house and said, I'm recommending that this lender give you the loan contingent that you replace the wood rot and treat it with a stain or a paint. I come back and I look at it again, and then I will sign off to let that lender know that they can give you the loan for the house. So those sellers absolutely had to fix that stuff if they wanted to sell that house to those buyers. All right. So just because you're out of the home inspection, the option period, it doesn't mean you're necessarily in the clear when it comes to an appraiser coming to the house and looking at any lender required repairs, because those things are going to have to get done if that buyer wants to get the loan for the house. So when it comes to, well, what things should and shouldn't and have to and don't have to get fixed, absolutely lender required repairs need to be done in order for that buyer to get the loan. Anything else is up for negotiation. If you learned something new, I would love to know it. If you've got any comments about this video or any more insight or thought that I missed something, definitely let me know in the comments below. And then definitely stick around for this video right here. It's obviously a good one. And then I will see you next week.